I decided to make a video of pulling a head on a 2003 Mazda Tribute with the 3.0 Ford V6 engine. I didn't see any videos online of this being done, so I thought it might be a good idea to make one if anybody needs help. So I just had the idea to do this kind of like, I don't know, halfway done pulling it out. But just to show what I did, I removed the injectors and I guess that would be the lower intake manifold. The intake manifold sits on. So you do that just by removing these bolts. Well, first you got to remove the intake manifold, which if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't be doing this job. But this is pretty easy to remove too. You just take these bolts off. Also, I took the injector bolts off, but I don't think you have to do that. I think that's just to get the rail off, but I did anyways. So yeah, once you get these bolts off, the whole thing just pulls up. I just kept the harness on it. Get that out of the way. Whenever you take that off, usually there's going to be a lot of crud in here. You don't want any of that falling into the cylinders, so just make sure you vacuum that out, or get it out of the way any way you can, just not in the cylinders. Took the motor mount off. I had a jack underneath. I wasn't sure if the whole engine, I'm not really familiar with this engine, but I wasn't sure if the whole engine was going to fall down, but I think it's in some kind of cradle, so I was able to just take the jack out because I was working underneath anyways. So I took the mount off, and the engine's just sitting there. Then you got to take the harmonic balancer off to be able to get this timing cover off. It's an extreme pain. It's terrible to get off, unless you have the right tools. I went to Harbor Freight to buy something to pull it off, and I should have bought a harmonic balancer puller, but I needed a gear puller for other things, so I bought a gear puller set, which did not work very well, but I was able to get it to work. So it looks like this, and I needed it because I need these for another job to separate a bearing. But anyways, you use this. Here, I'll show you what I did. Get it off with this. Which you can use it, I mean, you can rig up something to get this off if you don't have the tool. But you pretty much get 3 bolts like this that fit in the threads. And then this center bolt goes in here and has a pin on the end of it. So what I did, because this is only a 2, what you're supposed to do with it is put these in here and then hook them to like the inside of this. But since it's only, I couldn't really get it to work because these really didn't fit in here right. They do now, but whenever it's up against that, you can't get them in behind it. So that wasn't going to work. So what I did was screw these 3 in. Put this in here. Well, maybe like this. Got it as straight as I could, and then I put, what did I use? You can really use anything, but I used these little brackets I had, and threaded them on here like this with the nut on top. And then as this was pushing back, because of screwing that into the head or into the crankshaft, it put pressure on it, made it come back against these, and then these held it in place as I put pressure, and it pulled it off. So definitely not the right way to do it, but I made it work. So anyways, that's how I got the balancer off. If you buy the right tool, you know, it'll probably be a lot easier. Anyways, next you got to take a bunch of 10s out on this cover, and it looks like the alternator bracket that holds the alternator is also screwed into that cover, so you're gonna take that off as well. which that's a pain to get to. After that cover's off, to get the cover off, you're going to have to take the two 10s on top of the other head as well, because they're screwed into the timing cover. But yeah, I'm going to be working on that, getting the rest of those off. Probably have to take the power steering pump off. I believe that's what that is. Yeah. And then, yeah, then I'm going to be taking the valve cover off, cams out, head bolts out, and we'll go from there. Alright, now that that's done, time to install our spark plug. Always remember to hand start spark plug. What was it? Uh-oh. It's not coming out now either. Okay, that is not good. That is not good. I don't know what just happened down there, but the whole thing was just spinning. Okay, I don't know what just happened. Maybe that was a little too much pressure for the threads. I'm just joshing with you guys. Never install a spark plug with anything other than a hand tool. That's really good advice to live by. So anyways, I didn't give you any backstory to why I'm doing this. In fact, the reason I'm doing it is not because of the head gasket. It's not because of the head gasket leaking. It is because number one cylinder blew out a spark plug. So that's the reason that I'm putting a brand new head on this thing. Well, head that I got at the yard. Anyways, I know what you're thinking. Why don't I just run down to Advanced, grab myself a helicoil, get this thing fixed up in a couple minutes? Well, I cannot do that, in fact, because the spark plug hole was already bored out, overbored, and sleeved. So I don't know if it was an issue. I didn't do it, but if somebody didn't put the sleeve in right, didn't tap it out right, I don't know what the reason is, but there's no way to fix that other than putting a new head on, apparently. I called around a couple dealerships in Napa, and they said the only other option is to put a new head on. They don't make a bigger sleeve to fit that. So that is the reason I'm putting a new head on this thing, so I don't give a crap that those threads stripped out. Anyways, back to work. Hope I gave somebody a heart attack with that last video. Anyways, I just succeeded in removing the timing cover. It is a real pain to get off, full of 10mm and 13mm bolts. Let's get that off. It should look like this. Don't forget about, there's 2 bolts in the oil pan that hold it on. This thing's leaking real bad. I think it's either out of the oil pan or it might have actually been out of this seal. So it should look like this. So you have it off, you get to see the chains, tensioners, and I think this is for the crankshaft position sensor, which is right there on the cover. So you remove this and make sure that goes on the right way. I don't know if it can go on both ways, but make sure that goes on the correct way when you go to put it back on. So now I'm gonna have to get the marks lined up correctly so that when we remove the cams, we can get everything back in time. Next, I'm gonna be taking the valve cover off. Got all these bolts loose, so it should come off. A little bit of force. Now we can see inside the head and the cams and all that good stuff. So the next thing we got to do to get the head off is remove the head bolts. But to get to the head bolts, we need to remove the cams And to remove the cams, we need to remove the chain. So, of course, the next thing we're going to have to do is line up the marks, get the chain off. Then we're going to be removing these caps. Now, remember whenever you remove these caps, that they have to go on the exact same way and same position that they came off of. They were machined with the head to fit the cam perfectly. So you got to make sure they go on in the exact same position. What I usually do is I'll take 2 different colored markers and I'll put one color dot on this one and one color dot on that one. So I know if it's intake or exhaust. And then I'll label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 because there's 4 of them. So 1, 2, 3, yeah. That's just the way I do it. You can do it any way you want to do it, but just make sure they go on the exact same way they came off. Alrighty. Alright, so I think I figured out the timing marks on this thing. I was looking at some PDF files and it was pretty confusing, but I think I got it figured out. So every engine I've ever done timing on, whether that be for doing a head or changing the timing belt or chain, I've always put it in top dead center. And that means number 1 piston in the topmost position. Well, on this engine, they don't tell you to do that for some reason. They say that it needs to be in the neutral position. So if you're working on the head that I'm working on, which is the first one that needs to be removed, or the first chain anyways that needs to be removed, yeah, so this is actually the right hand side head and this is the left hand side head. That was kind of confusing to me as well, because when you're looking at the front of the engine, which is this side with the pulleys, you would think this would be the left hand side or the right hand side. No, you would think this would be the left hand side and this would be the right hand side, but they don't consider it. They consider that side the right hand side, this hand the left hand side. I think it's because they're talking like if the engine was turned this way with the pulleys facing right here, it'd be if you were sitting inside the car, this would be the right hand side and this would be the left hand side. Anyways, if you're working on the head that I'm working on, which is the right hand side, you need to have the keyway in the 3 o'clock position. So that's where I have it right now. They do have a way to get it in TDC. I think it needs to be in the 11 o'clock position, but they don't advise removing the head in that position for some reason, unknown to me. Anyways, I marked the keyway. Oh, I used the harmonic balancer bolt. That way I could, turn the crankshaft, get it where I needed it to be. But yeah, I marked the keyway, and then I marked a correlating mark on the chain. That way, I usually do that. That way I can get it on exactly how it came off. So that's lined up. And then up here, you'll see there's a timing mark right there, and timing mark right there. So you want the exhaust camshaft, the one closest to the firewall, to be straight up and down, and you want the intake camshaft to be 90 degrees to the right of that one. So 90 degrees out from that, pointing to the right. So I got that lined up. I made my marks on the chain, that way I can get that on exactly how it came off. And then I'm also, there's these holes in the pulley that, in the gear, on the cam, that are right underneath the timing mark. So that makes it a little bit easier to know where you're at. I actually used a punch. I put a punch through the hole and then marked where it touched on the cap. That way I just have some safety. It never hurts to be too careful. So I did that, and then I'm not using this head. Like I said, I picked up a head at the yard, so I'm not going to be using these caps. I'm going to be using the caps that came with the head, but I marked them anyways just so you could see what I do. I mean, it's pretty common sense, but I just used a green marker on the exhaust caps and a black one on the intake caps, and I marked them 1 through 4. Pretty simple. That way they go on exactly how they came off. So yeah, I think that's about it. A few things I did not mention that I need to mention when removing the head. This water outlet needs to be removed. It's two 10mm bolts, one on the top, which is very easy to get to, and then one under here, which is a pain to get to. I was able to get to it with a 1/4-inch ratchet and a flex extension. You know, you might be able to get off with something else, but that's what I had to use. And then also, the exhaust manifold needs to be removed. That's pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, that needs to come off. It's kind of hard to get to, but I think it's 3 bolts on the top, 3 on the bottom. Other than that, I think that's about it, and I think we're ready to take this head off. Alright, so chains are off, caps are off, cams are out. Remove the head bolts. They are 13mm. I believe there's 8 of them. And now we're ready to remove the head. Let's see if I can maybe do that with the camera sitting there. Ooh, get these out. Alright, now we're ready. So the head is removed, as you can see. This is what I'm talking about with it not being in top dead center. I believe that is cylinder number 3, and you can see that one's at the topmost position. Usually when you pull a head off of something, you know, you would want it top dead center, so this piston number 1 would be at the top, but with this engine they suggest it being in this position, which they consider the neutral position. So I'm going to be cleaning that surface off and vacuuming all this crap out. I think there's a dead bird down there. Pretty nasty. And just making it a real nice clean surface for the new gasket to sit on for the head. I was able to sneak the head out I didn't have to mess with the exhaust manifold at all, other than taking those bolts out. It does seem like it's pretty tight up against there, and you can't move it at all because of how the exhaust is set up, but I was able to get it out even with some studs still being stuck in the back of the head, and I was still able to get it out. So you should be able to get it out as well without having to mess with the exhaust too much. It's usually not a very fun thing to do because that's when you get broken bolts and not fun stuff like that. So yeah, here's a new head. I just had it resurfaced on the bottom, and we will be installing it as soon as the gasket comes. Alright guys, thanks for watching. This is part 1.